Hello, and welcome to another video. This video I'm not using cam, so if you guys like that, feel free to let me know, I don't mind. But this game is not too long, so I decided to commentate it. I was thinking about like putting music in one of these. I do have a couple videos that I want to upload. I'll probably put music in one of these for those that, like listening to music that I like. I'll try to get some new songs for you guys. Other than that, we're playing Annihilation with Spiteful Saber. This is kind of earlier on in the day. I believe you can see the time in the top left here. Starforge, for whatever reason, this early is kind of like always like this. I don't really understand it. Obviously, there's not usually this many healers, so do take it with a grain of salt. I just happen to get lucky with matchmaking here. So for the most part, Annihilation is just slash. After you put Spiteful Saber on somebody, it's just slash using your priority. So obviously your Force Rend and Berserk together. Typically you want to use Berserk on cooldown because it'll give you healing. Annihilate on cooldown, Deadly Saber, and Dual Saber Throw on cooldown. Obviously if you never get Dual Saber Throw unprocced, that means you can still get the proc for it, which will reset the cooldown of Dual Saber Throw. So it is always good to use unprocced Dual Saber Throw too. It also provides a slow and does decent amount of damage. And you'll see me do it a couple times throughout the video, like just now. It's definitely really nice to do, and it can definitely give you a little extra damage, especially in AoE situations. Other than that, gameplay is incredibly simple. There's probably not a more simple thing that you can play, unless you're playing like Dirty Fighting or Marksman. Even then, I think Dirty Fighting's probably got to be easier. So for Dirty Fighting, you're really just using two range dots, so then you have Explode, and then you can cool, and it'll refresh your dots, and then you snipe, quick draw, and you quite literally just repeat what you just did. You do have a series of shots, but it's not really worth using, and for the most part, Annihilation follows a similar, more simple strategy of just use everything on cooldown, but also at the same time 90% of your damage is going to be slash with Spiteful Saber on the target. Or I guess Rupture on the target. A lot of your damage will be Spiteful Saber, and a lot of your other damage will be Slash. Slash is the ability basically that reprocs your Rupture, which is part of Spiteful Saber. If Spiteful Saber wasn't a thing, Annihilation would be a lot worse than what it is. The only reason why it's doing any damage at all is mainly because of Spiteful Saber. The previous version, where you had Force Rend do a lot more damage, that was really nice. It definitely made Annihilation a little bit more playable than it is now. Really the issue comes down to this is a 4-meter class. You have to be relatively close to your target. You don't really have any like CC immunity, you don't really have any CC, you don't really have anything to help you stay on target. You can't afford to take Rabbit's Root, you can't really take any slow. It's just doesn't feel good. It's a parsing spec that is reduced to basically nothing at this point. It's very unfortunate, and it doesn't even have like any like individual advantage over the other specs either. Outside of healing, that's really the only unique thing that it has, but that healing is not going to save you for not having the CC immunity, any immunity to like pretty much anything unless you have Blood Ward. Blood Ward is still vulnerable to knockbacks, by the way, if anybody didn't know that. So you can still knock them back, still force push them, you can still overload them. All that stuff, it still goes through. So Annihilation is very easy to control. And with it being such a class that's reliant on uptime, it kind of falls flat, kind of like the other classes that are currently sustained DPS too. At the very least, Arsenal has a burst tactical option. So they're not in as bad of a position, and Marksman also has some other tactical options that are not terrible, but its damage still is kind of suffering. But it's really the issue for all sustained DPS classes that have a tactical that increases their damage by just doing their normal rotation, that basically turns it into an uptime, like class as a whole. So think of Arsenal, Annihilation, what's the other one? Primed Ignition for obviously Arsenal. Then there's Agitating Energies for Marksman. Obviously Spiteful Saber for Annihilation. I want to say there's like 2 more, but for the most part, like these are the top 3. They're relatively really reliant on their tactical, especially in PvE, which means that they suffer a lot in PvP, which is not surprising. A sustained tactical is probably not going to be the move for PvP, but if that's your only option, you know, that sucks. Going forward, I really hope that they either get rid of these things, like if we have another expansion or a big combat change, they either remove these things or just make it easier for these classes to have uptime, because that's really the main issue. But it's really hard to do that with something like Arsenal. Arsenal needs movement, but it has a 7% slow on Blazing Bolts, so they gotta be really careful. Arsenal can be very, very easily very aggressive to play against. I do feel like, you know, rotational slows, like, out of all the pruning they did it so wrong, I feel. Like, in terms of, like, PvE, like, I get it. Like, reduce the abilities to make it easier to play, it's totally fine. I don't have an issue with that. What I do have issue with is that if we're gonna prune CCs, prune them at least evenly across the board. And if you're gonna prune defensives, at least prune them, you know, evenly across the board. And if you're gonna prune utility, please just do it evenly across the board, which is just not what happened. So there's obviously meta classes and non-meta classes, and there's classes that just straight up get crit passives built into their spec now. Other classes don't have that, so therefore, you know, they don't have the same amount of crit. They don't have the same amount of availability for crit. Obviously, they're probably not going to perform as well. There's a reason why Hatred does so well, it's because it has so many critical passes now. There's a reason why Deception does so well, it's because it has so many critical passes now. The list goes on. There's a lot of things that exist that are just making them a lot better. So for example, the penetrating rounds passive that increases damage is actually really good. And if that was just like a passive part of marksmanship, that wouldn't be a bad thing. It really wouldn't, and it still probably wouldn't put it up there into the meta or, you know, at the top parsing specs. There's a lot of these things that are just like, okay, they exist, but do they need them? Probably not. But at the same time, you know, you look at Marauder, defensive power, and it's like, okay, when you think of Marauder, what abilities do you think about? I think of Predation and Undying Rage. Those abilities are iconic, sometimes Force Choke, but most of the time it's Predation, because everybody hates Predation and what it does to the frame rate. And I'm also thinking about Undying Rage. Why do I think of Undying Rage? Because that was like the core kit to Annihilation, Marauder, like as a whole, back then. We used to have set bonuses designed around Undying Rage to increase the duration of Undying Rage, reduce the cooldown of Undying Rage. Even in 4.0, you could double stack 2.0 set plus I think 4.0 set to get even further reduced cooldown on Undying Rage, and also with the talent at the time, I believe, increased the duration by 2 seconds, so you're looking at like 7 seconds of Undying Rage with like a minute 30 cooldown. That was insane. Obviously back then, Undying Rage still took health from you when you used it, but still, that's like absolutely insane. I do miss when set bonuses were a little bit more simple, and I do miss when, you know, tacticals didn't exist. And the main reason why I don't like tacticals is because a lot of the tacticals are just too strong, and or the class is too reliant on it. I really think that tacticals as a whole just need to be changed to either be full utility based or full defensive based. One or the other. I prefer utility. Here, I had already tabbed, but I left backwards. Super weird. So I think utility based would be obviously better. So anything that would change the way you play the game, right? So like, you know, the rocket punch, though, 10-meter rocket punch, I think something like that is a good idea. I think stuff like that that changes the way the class plays would just be better. That would then remove the over-reliance on damage tacticals to basically compete with the other classes. So no more Prime Ignition, no more Spiteful Saber. You know, those things should probably just be baked into the class or something. And then going into things like Power Load. Power Load was insane, and it got baked into the class. Why did it get baked into the class? Well, it pretty much was always taken. I wonder why it was always taken. Because there wasn't really a good option, and that one was just so good. Why was it so good? Because it's the only one that actually had time spent into it. Do you really think they thought a lot when they were making the tactical sonic missile heal? Like, there's no way that they were thinking. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll catch you guys again soon.